the minimal viable podcast is an idea that I took from that whole minimal viable product, which is a Silicon Valley term for startups, for lean startups. And the focus today is to give you the bare tools, just the basic tools and the basic understanding that you need to launch your own podcast about whatever you think that you might have an audience for. We're going to focus on how to start quick and learn by doing. And we're just going to cover some essential steps for starting your podcast. The minimal viable podcast is based on this experiential learning cycle where we learn by doing or experiencing, we reflect on it, we think on it, and of course, we take action. So as I'm speaking today and as we're having this conversation, think about how you can take action to start your podcast and your purpose for that kind of podcast. Consider what we're talking about today as a pre-flight checklist. I've got Falcor there and a never-ending story reference for anyone who likes 80s movies. Let's see by a show of hands. Fantastic. That's the thing. Like, even if you didn't grow up in the 80s, it's a classic. I will forever remember watching Falcor be ridden by Atreyu. It was a climactic movie moment. The next thing I want to talk about is how important video is to podcasting. Video, we often think is the opposite. Why would I produce a video while I'm podcasting? That doesn't make much sense. After all, Audition is complicated enough without having to introduce Premiere Pro or Adobe Premiere Rush into the mix. But it's not supplemental anymore because the number one podcasting platform right now with 1 billion users that are active is YouTube. So even if you're thinking, oh, I don't really want to deal with video or I don't want to show my face, there are ways around that. You can create audiograms, you can create B-roll, you can do all sorts of things to help get your content onto the platform that right now is number one, followed by Spotify and Apple Podcasts. When you're thinking about what kind of thing you want to produce and how you want to produce it, think about how you might produce the video components in that podcast. Here's the pyramid. As you refine your purpose and concept, and I want you to do this with me on a separate sheet of paper, take a second and get a separate sheet of paper here while I'm talking so that you can be prepared to do the activity with me. Those of you who have taken AI in personal branding or are taking it now, or maybe have seen this in other places, it's all about aligning your passions and what makes you get lit up in the morning with what you think you'll be able to sell to an audience in terms of ideas and speaking about it. The first thing is the purpose pitch. The second, your unique perspective. And the third, your target audience. And think about target audience as who you were serving and why. Do you have an expertise that needs to be shared? Do you have an expertise that you just have to share because it's just too much fun to talk about? Do you have something that you would talk about for hours, even if no one was ever going to pay you? That's the key. If you can find that topic where you can talk for hours and have no problem filling time about a specific topic, that's a good place to start. And if you're not sure what that is, we have some exercises that will help you. Who are you serving and why? What makes your voice different? And think about a one-line statement or a purpose pitch that will guide all of your content. So take a second. We're going to hit pause on the presentation. And I want you to use these as prompts for your own brainstorming. And after you get done brainstorming, we can play with AI and we can give it what you are thinking about and ask for some refined ideas. But right now, it's important to kind of think of your own ideas. So these are the 3 questions I want you to think about and or answer. Who are you serving and why? Start with the audience. It's the foundation of the pyramid. What makes your voice different? What's your unique point of view? What makes that unique? Maybe you've had some experiences in the past with a certain topic. Maybe you've had some experience in the past that made you an expert in something you never thought you would be an expert in, and now you actually like the topic. And think about a statement that will guide all your content. What is it about? What is your podcast going to be about? So John, since you already have a YouTube channel, I'm going to ask, tell us about your YouTube channel. What would you say your purpose pitch, your unique perspective in your audience is for your YouTube channel so that people can get inspired?
It would be everyday and easy STEM projects that you can do, right? Science is accessible, and I just present projects that anyone could do with adult supervision if you're under 18.
Fantastic. And see how tight that was. That wasn't a long paragraph. That wasn't a textbook. This is just what I love to do, right? And your voice is different. Why, John?
My voice is different because I give a sort of how do I put it? I'm not going to say unsafe, but rather true to my name, mad scientist. Safety is number one, but like more like one and a half. I just do wild projects.
Wild projects. Give our new members some ideas of the wild projects that you do.
I'm making homemade rockets from household materials, and then I'm making a propane plasma pop gun. It's purely for a prop accessory, but it's still a fun little visual, which uses a propane torch to go through tubing into a large 5-gallon jug, which makes a big boom.
In a totally safe way, right?
Very safe, yes.
I like how you mentioned it's very visual, and that's important in podcasting too. Using visual language is important because we call it the theater of the mind. And that's what radio is. That's what podcasting is. It's the theater of the mind. So while we may not be able to explode something on camera, right, we can describe with rich description what that explosion was like. We can tell the story of that explosion and why it matters. Anyone else have anything they'd like to share in terms of their purpose pitch, their unique perspective, or their ideal target audience? We're still thinking about it. We're going to come back to this question. We're going to ask again. Our next idea here is something to help you with those three questions, and it's called Ikigai. This is a ancient Japanese concept of combining what you love, your expertise, what your audience needs, and what you might be able to be paid for. And in your notes right now, I encourage you to explore all four of these dimensions and think to yourself, well, what do I really love? And how might that overlap with my mission? What am I good at? And what does the world need? And how might that overlap with my profession? And what can I be paid for here? Mindfulness, flow, Kaizen, and following your bliss are all related concepts that help to inspire you to think about how to make lists in each of these Venn diagrams in a unique way. For example, there might be something that you're really good at, but the world doesn't necessarily need it, right? Asking yourself, does the world really need another person who's really good at this? Does it rise to the level of my passion? Does it rise to the level of I'd like to make this my mission? What can I be paid for? That's the idea. I see Leah shared some things in the chat. Creative convergence, creative career strategy, podcast, professional development, graphic design, collaboration, purpose and meaning, creativity, artistry, inclusivity, innovation, UX, UI design, skill building, PR, and personal growth. That is a huge list. So my suggestion here would, and this is advice that just so you know, Lee, I do not follow. I also have a very broad, far too broad and not narrow enough podcast. Really should be more narrow, but because I teach so many different classes, I like to keep it more in line with what I teach. So because I teach PR and I teach AI and personal branding and I teach podcasting, when really I should just have a podcast about PR or just a podcast about personal branding. I mix them all. So don't let it keep you from starting is the key. And if you start with something broad like that, you might notice that as you produce your episodes, you find yourself more drawn to one or the other. You find yourself more drawn to this part of this thing. In John's case, it's blowing stuff up. Safely. Oh, I gotta remember that part. Safely. Here it is. So this is our Ikigai from Lee. A great example here. Art, writing, practice creating, faith creating, artist, UX, UI designer, PR, graphic design. And we've got the values here. Fantastic. We've got art and education and design. And your mission is to inspire. Your passion is to create. Your profession is that of an artist. This is a really good example. Thanks for sharing, Lee. It's really important to not skip this step because this is going to help you avoid what's called burnout. If you do something you're not truly passionate about or something that doesn't help feed you in the long run, and just so you know, a very small percentage of podcasts are actually monetized. It's infinitesimally small compared to the number of podcasts that are out there. Kind of like YouTube channels, right? We have a very small percentage of people who are able to make money doing those things, but you will not sustain yourself if you aren't choosing something that you can really focus on. As you refine your podcast purpose and concept, think of 10 to 15 ideas and select your top 3. And of course, develop tentative episodes and titles and test your expertise on these topics as you discuss. Really effective way to get started, especially if you want to do so quickly, is to find experts to interview. And that's what my podcast focuses on. It focuses on other experts who are also experts in communication. And because I have some obviously expertise in that as a professor of practice in communication, I'm able to ask questions that hopefully lead to interesting and fun conversations. Using AI to brainstorm and research is important too. So as you refine your podcast. Don't do what I did and don't stop at something that's huge like communication and the courses you teach. Instead, choose one course, choose one thing, and narrow it down. And if you can commit to a format that aligns with your strengths, you'll also have a lot more longevity for your podcast because you'll have less resistance and less barriers. And that's what the MVP is all about. The minimum viable podcast is about how can I lessen the barriers to sitting down and recording. So that means making sure that your light's already set up, making sure your camera's set up, making sure that your mic is set up so that you don't have any barriers to creating. I think that's true for a lot of content creation tasks, whether we're talking about shooting videos of ourselves for Reels or TikToks or whatever. The less barriers and the less kind of restrictions you have that keep you from executing on your goal for that particular day, the easier it is going to be to create content. And a good rule of thumb is to commit to at least 14 episodes. Look at it as a series. Don't look at it as you're creating a podcast you're going to do the rest of your life. Look at it as a series where you're going to create about 14 episodes, and you'll be head and shoulders so far ahead of most podcasters because most podcasters stop at 3 to 4. So if you can do that many episodes, you will already be so far ahead of the game and get so much more practice that whenever you do find what you want specific to your passions and your interests really fuels you, you're going to have way more skills than if you stopped when most podcasters stop. The podcast purpose pitch concept. And she's already had a purpose pitch using this formula of podcast name, a video, hopefully podcast, that serves a specific audience who has specific needs. And that's important because, again, we're audience centric. We're starting with the audience and we're thinking about what is a unique selling proposition. And that means what's unique to our voice, what's unique to our perspective. What are we bringing from our life experience and our expertise that can help enlighten that conversation, have the kind of questions that we would want to ask our interviewees. And what's the ultimate? This becomes the North Star. It looks like it took a long time. Fantastic. Very fun. And you've asked a question as well in the chat, what proportion of solo to interviews? It's beautiful art and that it's art. So there's no wrong choices here. It's only choices that best align with you and your audience. If you find yourself more attracted to solo, I can tell you there's one barrier you've already gotten rid of, which is setting up interviews. If you want to do a solo podcast and like script your own interviews, the barrier is scripting things that are good as opposed to actual setting up interviews with other people, which can be a barrier to production. If you can't set up that interview with that person you want to talk to, that could be a real barrier to your production schedule and publishing in a way that helps to make your audience have that consistent feed. So just like in social media posting where we have consistency is an important touchstone, you also want to have that in podcasting as well. And that's why whenever you start, you want to make sure you do not launch unless you have 3 to 4 episodes ready to go so that you're not struggling to stay above water. I hope this podcast purpose and pitch concept help your MVP launch even faster because that's the purpose of it. Another common question is about the soundstage and how to craft a soundstage. You do not need the most professional rig possible, especially when we're talking about a minimal viable podcast. In fact, most people use their phone. And in using their phone, they're able to get really good sound in part because of enhancement software like this one. I'm going to drop this in the chat. I know a lot of you have heard of this before if you've been in any classes with me, but it's called podcast.adobe.com. And the link that I just shared more specifically that is in this slideshow is to the enhancement feature. You can take audio from your video that you've shot, for example, on this Zoom, and you can slice away that audio, put it into Adobe Podcast Enhance. And it's so much fun because you're able to enhance your audio with the help of AI software. So you don't no longer have to spend $700+ or $250 or even $50 on a rig. If you have a good smartphone, you upload it to the software, it can make it sound much better. Now, that being said, better your starting audio, the better you're going to be. And YouTube video folks know that people will turn off if your audio is not good. Whatever and wherever you're creating content on, I always encourage people to use software like this and tools like this to help to improve your listener experience because people will often endure bad video before they will endure bad audio. And that's doubly true with podcasters and podcast listeners. The one that I have is the Shure SM7B microphone. That's what I'm using right now. This is what it looks like. But I can't take this into a closet, right? So I have to have things like the sound panels you see behind me. XLR goes to a soundboard, which is called a Rodecaster Pro, which is another kit that costs money. And that then goes into my machine or my computer, and that's what I'm recording on. And that's why this sounds good without that enhancement. Now, if I feed this through enhancement, because it's a Zoom recording, and Zoom historically might have not the best audio recording software, I can still improve this sound by taking it to Adobe Podcast. So that's the mics. This part, we're not going to go as deep into because I want to make sure we leave more time for questions, but I just want to tell you a little bit about how important it is to tell stories in your podcast, especially if it's a solo podcast. Using specific frameworks for storytelling, like the Pixar method or like the hero's journey, which John actually already covered in our content creators meeting. So thank you, John. You've already talked about the hero's journey in content creation. And of course, Burke's dramatistic pentad, which is more of a rhetorical one. Storyboarding, I think, is one of the most useful methods because by storyboarding, you can use any of these other methods. The Pixar method can be put into a storyboard. The hero's journey can be put into a storyboard, and so can the dramatistic pentad. So effective storytelling as a way of helping you script and giving you format and function to how you're scripting can help all kinds of content production, not just podcasting. Next thing that I want you to think about in your minimal viable podcast is interviewing skills, specifically the research. Setting aside the time for the research is something that a lot of podcasters don't do, especially when they're starting out, and it can really help. I don't always do a good job of setting aside time for research for my guest either. I definitely have failed at this. But when my guest has written a book, I always read it. That is really important so that you can have a conversation about the content, preparing questions, focusing on why and how, and questions specifically that might evoke emotional responses from the text, from the book, from maybe some previous social posts that they have given. And specifically being present, then focusing on what you're going to say next or the next question, and fully listening and being in the moment is another huge key to podcasting success. And of course, editing. I think this is the one thing that if you make any money, this is the first hire for most content creators. They're most of the time going to hire an editor, or they're going to use one of these AI software that is helping to edit as well. One thing that's not as this presentation that I do use that will hopefully help answer the question in the chat as well is, yes, I do use Premiere Pro to edit my podcast because I'm, again, creating for video. In using Adobe Premiere Pro, what I will do is I will right click and I will, this is simple, so I don't need to do a demo for you. I will right click and I will click edit in Audition, and that's going to create a WAV file automatically. So I can take that WAV file and I can drop it into the Adobe Podcast Enhance software that we shared and talked about earlier. And that's going to immediately up-level my game in terms of the sound and quality and tenor and warmth of my voice. And the reason I do it that way instead of on my computer with the Premiere Pro button, because I have a Mac Mini. I'm running on a Mac Mini over here. I know y'all have Mac Studios and you have MacBook Pros and all these wonderful devices, but for my purposes, I want to make sure that that audio is processed offsite in the cloud before I actually pop it back into my Premiere Pro for editing. So that's one of my first steps in editing is I'm going to take the original file and I'm going to upload it to Adobe Podcast Speech Enhance. I'm going to make sure that that processing is done off of my machine, and I'm going to download it again and I'll pop it back in and it'll match the video perfectly because I haven't edited yet. And then of course we start editing, and that can take a long time. And as I was saying before, that's usually a good first hire idea because it is so much labor intensive, specifically editing. So the whole structure here, you're going to plan, record, edit, and produce. You're going to plan your session, structure each episode. The structure is something that a lot of people sometimes struggle with because it's one of those things that have a lot of different choices in how you want to structure your episodes. And sometimes choice and decision can be the enemy of action, the enemy of getting it done. Having a scripted out hook, main content, your 3 points, your summary, your next steps, and a teaser for the next episode can really, again, help to relieve the tension you might feel in your production process. And Just so you know, this does not have to be perfect and you don't have to follow each step. For the longest time, I didn't always have a very effective hook. I was like, I would rather publish than not publish, so I'm just going to go for it. Or my hook wasn't as good as it could be. And also the teaser for next episode, I sometimes don't know what episode will be next. So if I was a better planner, I could have that teaser for the next episode and my podcast would be so much better because I would be able to help the listener and expect what's coming next and look forward to it. And especially on YouTube, sometimes they'll have a hook ladder where they're, hey, if you like this episode, check out this episode. And they have that specific episode embedded in their channel so that the person will be more likely to click on it because it's directly related to what they've already chosen to watch. And it's similar with podcasting. We want to make sure we lead the audience to the next decision without having them have to guess. Again, it's an MVP, and the purpose here, the aim is to create about 14 episodes, at least 7 minutes each. My episodes are always about 50 minutes to over an hour, in part because I'm trying to meet learning objectives for my students and for my courses, why they're a little bit longer. Riverside FM is the platform that I use as well. It offers 2 hours of high quality audio and video for free if you want to try it out. It is much better than Zoom. And it also, since I've signed up, they've had a lot of opportunities. They have improved the software for recording. So you have more editing features that are actually in the platform that allows you to edit things a little bit faster. And they have some sound processing similar to Adobe AI Enhance. So you can have a little bit better audio quality for your guest and you. And then you can download that and edit that in Premiere Pro. So that's how my workflow works now. I'll record in Riverside and edit just a little bit in Riverside, and then I'll do it in Premiere Pro. The other thing to think about here is your hosting platform specifically. I chose Libsyn because it was the oldest, but it's not the easiest. It's not the most user-friendly. It's the ones that I chose because I knew that I was going to be in this for the long game. The more accessible podcasting platforms where you will upload your content to so that they can push it to all the podcasting platforms out there are Anchor, Podbean, and Buzzsprout. And Buzzsprout, I think, is one of the most intuitive. A lot of people also like how Riverside can publish directly to Spotify now. So in your Riverside app, you can publish directly to Spotify through the monetization tools and things like that too. So again, popular networks, Spotify, Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, I think might have gone away by now. Notably, YouTube, the top podcasting network, always requires separate uploading. Libsyn has something, but they charge a lot extra for it if they're going to do that. So that's something to be aware of. Again, distribution is important. And social media collaborations, repurposing content is important. I already told you that launching with at least 3 to 4 episodes ready is really important. And keeping in mind that giveaways and encouraging people to leave reviews, all of those things matter in the context of trying to grow your show. And of course, after you've launched, that's the next chapter. It's how do you grow your show? And calling to action for specific reviews or follows on social media, those things must be done to grow your show. So here's what the call to action I have for you. I want you to try to produce at least 14 episodes, at least 7 minutes, in an entire season, and look at it as a sprint that will, at the very least, amazing professional growth for you and your show specifically. Andrew had mentioned Adobe Podcasting, the Adobe Podcast software that is free through UTSA. This is just so much fun. This is what the actual Enhance tool looks like. This is what I use the most often. But if you click on Adobe Podcast, or you just go to podcast.adobe.com and you click on Go to Studio, we have an opportunity to create a project here. This project, invite others. So if you would like to be invited to be on this podcast demo, please give me, actually, let's do that. Let's create a link. Boom. Click on this link. I'm going to put it in the chat. If your mic is strong with the force, click on this and let's talk. And let me show you how it works because it's super fun. There used to not be links. And they've also added a lot of other things too. I really like the filter because this is the same Enhance software that I use all the time on my podcast. The music, because it has some simple choices here that you can do, will help to up your show a little bit. Let's hit record. On the show, we're welcoming John. John, what is the show called? Tell us about it.
My show is Modern Mad Scientists. It's a persona where I do, as the name implies, mad scientist experiments.
Who's your target audience for that again? Is it young people or old people? Who is this?
You know, anyone who watch it, but primarily young people, more of the younger to mid high school range. It's where I all STEM videos that got me interested in STEM, and I want to pass the torch on to them.
I grew up with Bill Nye the Science Guy. Right now, my son and I love to watch the Mark Rober videos. Is your channel kind of like that?
More of a Michael Reeves esque type vibe, if you've ever heard of him, but Mark Rober is an inspiration.
And if people wanted to check out your show, what can they expect?
Experiments gone wild.
What are we talking here, John?
Enough if you have adult supervision, do on the weekend for fun.
Do you have a call to action for our listeners today?
See science videos. Follow me on all platforms. Modern Man Scientist. I'm on TikTok, Instagram, YouTube.
Why would you want to be a part of Content Creators at UTSA, John?
Inclusive group here at UTSA, where we talk about strategy and different ways of creating effective content, whether it be YouTube, art, or just portfolios, and a collaborative effort on helping everyone grow.
Modern Mad Scientist and Content Creators at UTSA. These are two things that we want you to check out after the episode. John, thanks so much for joining us. We hit stop there and it's uploading. His is good, mine is good. Now what's going to happen is it's going to transcribe. And what's great about the transcription, kind of like right now, a feature that's relatively new in the past couple of years in Adobe Premiere Pro is you can edit the text, having go to the timeline to edit. So because this is audio only, when you're editing the text, it's kind of like if you've heard of Descript, it's similar to where you can edit the text that you have and you don't have to edit the timeline. So let's say, for example, I wanted to add something here. Let's say I wanted to add a little bit of music. I don't want two intros that are different. Split this and I can drag it to end. And all of a sudden I've created my outro and I've got the outro at the end in part because of that. So it's super easy. You can also put in a placeholder and of course filters like the Adobe filter. Says he prefers to go with the flow on podcast. No script, unscripted episodes. Fun. It's fun. I think it's good to have a basic outline, our basic questions just on hand. I do know that having a list of questions can really shoot you in the foot though. So sometimes it's really good to not stick to your list of questions and instead just really deeply listen in the moment.
An excellent presentation. Thank you, Ryan. I want to expand on that quick point he said about like having a list of questions. I don't really watch award shows like the Grammys, but every time I see clips of the interviewer asking a celebrity or an artist, like, and then they give like an answer and they're like, okay, they don't go further in depth. They say, okay, cool, next question. I'm like, no, like, you could have asked them like 20 more things about that. I was interested. Why didn't you say this? Like, it's really interesting. It's really, you want people to ask a question and go further in depth. It just not the list, bam, 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 cover your bases.
Thank you. It's a common problem, and it's one of those things that most certainly takes practice to be able to be in the moment. And you can have, my son was asking for seaweed. So to be in the moment, I'm talking about being in the moment as I'm being ripped away from the moment. Irony is there, right? Being in the moment takes practice. And if you're just focused on your next question, you're going to miss so much good stuff.